Yeah, when we talk a lot about who Jesus is, who Jesus really was and is, and nowadays in the culture we live in, a lot of times what comes up, the conversation we want to have is what was the color of the skin of Jesus, and I would say that Jesus would be offended that when we talk about who Jesus is, it's limited to the conversation of the pigmentation of his skin. Um, because I think that when you want to define who Jesus is, it's so much broader than that. And if you're stuck on that, well, we got bigger issues at hand. But Dr. Harold Page said the percentage of the genes that make up our external appearance is zero point zero 0.01. Zero point zero 0.01 is the percentage of the genes that make up our external appearance. So for anyone to be defined or identified by the color of their skin, the way they look on the outside, is a terrible definition of anyone to try to define anyone. But I think if we want to know who Jesus really was, the best way we can do that, there's a really cool story in Scripture. There's a lot, actually. You should check it out. But in Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 42, and I'll sum it up for you. There was a guy who came in who had leprosy. And then if you had leprosy in this time in culture, it was a terrible thing to have because what leprosy did was it defiled a person. In this culture, if you were defiled, you couldn't enter the temple. And if you came toward and touched anyone else, they became defiled as well. And it was a terrible thing to be because leprosy was a disease that ate away at your skin. Your skin looked terrible. But it was deeper than the skin because what leprosy did was it isolates. It would isolate you. You would have to leave your family and your friends. You had to go stay in a place away from everyone else because you wouldn't want to defile anyone else, and you wouldn't want anyone else to get this disease. If you were defiled in this culture, you were as good as dead. So it defiled you. It made you unclean. It isolated you. And when you went in public to make it, just to show you how real this was. When you go in public, if you had leprosy, your clothes were torn and you had to cover your face so people would know. And then you would have to enter a place and yell, unclean, unclean, when you enter around other people. How terrible would it be to have to be defined by something bad like that everywhere you went? And Jesus knew that. So when this man went up to Jesus, he said, if you are willing and you can, or you can and you're willing, but you make me clean. And Jesus says, I am willing, be healed. And he makes this man clean. Now, we want to know who Jesus is. I think this is one of the greatest stories to show us that. Not the greatest. I think that's the cross. But one of the greatest because what Jesus did was he showed compassion to someone that nobody else would show compassion to. Normally what would happen if a priest was to touch someone who had leprosy, they would become defiled as well, so they can no longer be a priest. But Jesus, being God in the flesh, the very Son of God, came and was not defiled because of his deity, who he was. But he healed this man. He showed his compassion. That's who Jesus was. And Jesus told this guy, he said, hey, listen, go to the temple and show yourself to them so they'll know that God has healed you. And what happened is this man was restored back to his family, restored back to where he belonged. And because of that, people surrounded Jesus, some who liked him, some who didn't, but he had to go to a desolate place. So what you see is that it foreshadowed what Jesus was going to do. Jesus took this man's place. This story foreshadows what Jesus did for us who believe in Jesus, is that he took our place. The leper in the story is this leper, but this leper in the story is also you and I. We are defiled by sin, marked by death, or isolated. That's what sin wants to do. Sin wants to isolate us. Sin will always take you further than you want to go and keep you longer than you want to stay there. But Jesus, in his compassion, went to the cross and said, I know who you are. I know who you created to be and who I'm dying and going to rise again for you to be. So that's exactly what Jesus did. He went to the cross to take our place for our sin because of his love and his compassion for us. That's when we talk about who is Jesus. That's what Jesus should be defined. And we want to define who Jesus is. It's hard to put in words. We can't put it all into words, but that's the discussion we should have. Jesus is the purest form of love. Right? He is the Son of God. Man, it's a beautiful story of compassion in who Jesus really is. And it can't simply be limited by the external appearance of what Jesus actually looked like.